The Supreme Court has temporarily blocked the enforcement of an abortion law that could cause all clinics in Louisiana to close except for one. The justices reversed an earlier ruling for a federal appeals court that allowed Louisiana to begin enforcing its 2014 clinic regulation law, even as it's being challenged in the courts. The law requires doctors who perform abortions to have admitting privileges at nearby hospitals. The ruling comes just days after the High Court heard arguments in a major abortion case from Texas. So is the Supreme Court's ruling a sign that a similar law in Texas could be in peril? That's our topic this half hour. We want to hear from you on our Fox 26 Facebook page. Weigh in on Twitter as well. Use the hashtag Fox26forlife. Joining us live in the newsroom is our panel led by our senior legal analyst Chris Tritico, news analyst Mustafa Tamiz, often involved with strategy for Democrats, and public policy analyst Jackie Bally, often involved with strategizing for the Republicans. Good morning again.
Good morning.
So what do you think? Is this a sign of how they're going to ultimately rule in the Texas case?
I don't think so. A lot of people are looking at it that way. The only thing that's interesting in my view about this is that Clarence Thomas is the only one who announced publicly that he was opposed to this, when in Texas, when they announced a similar ruling, it was announced that the ruling was 5-4 on the stay, and so that's the only interesting part of this. This law is strikingly similar to the Texas law that was just argued, and it's all going to wash out with the Texas case, and so I just don't think it shows anything other than the court is saying let's leave everything the way it is until we have a ruling on the Texas case. That's kind of the way I see it. I don't think it's a big tell one way or the other. The dynamic of the court has changed, and so we're going to have to see the way this thing comes down. The arguments in this, Jackie, have changed because the dynamic of the court has changed, and the arguments are changing. But now they're focusing on just one or two justices as opposed to looking at how they can focus their arguments. One of the things that we're looking at now, though, as we focus on these cases, is this admitting privileges argument that has changed, because the hospitals are coming in and saying, you know what, we're going to admit these patients whether that doctor has admitting privileges or not, and it's not really a big deal.
Well, Justice Kennedy is the one a lot of us are looking at, because he's going to be the swing justice, and we really don't know, with the absence of Scalia, exactly how they are going to rule on this. One of the things that's really encouraging is that during the arguments, Kennedy and Roberts were both asking the abortion centers that made the claim that because of this, because of the Texas law, that women were now being denied certain rights, and they kept saying, provide the proof. Where's the proof? Where's the evidence of your statement? So I think that's encouraging, but we really don't know how they're going to rule.
One of the interesting things was Clarence Thomas actually spoke to audible gasp from the room, because he hadn't spoken in 10 years. But what about this?
He has to talk now.
Arguments? Yeah, he doesn't have Scalia there. What about these arguments that have been really filtering up from in the hospital, saying we admit these patients whether that doctor has admitting privileges or not. If you have to come to the hospital, you're coming into the hospital. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think it adds to the pro-choice argument. But I think that the difference in this whole case is that in the past it's always been focused on the fetus. This is one of the first cases where the focus is on women.
The patient, right?
And that's a unique thing. And in the legislature, there was an emphasis to say this is trying to protect women's health, when in reality it was actually making women's health a lot worse. That's why we're talking about this case in Louisiana. That will eliminate all Planned Parenthood except for one in the entire state of Louisiana. In Texas, it will eliminate all Planned Parenthood except for 8 for in a state.
Well, not Planned Parenthood clinics, not specifically Planned Parenthood.
Well, yeah, but I think all but 8 Planned Parenthood clinics will be the only ones that are open in a state that serves 26 million people. So it has a huge, significant impact. I agree with you that I don't think that this is a real tell. And I think that the hospital's move is going back to health, which I think is an important element.
The interesting issue here, though, is that Texas, it was upheld, and so if they tie 4-4, the law takes effect. In Louisiana, it was blocked, so if it ties 4-4, then their law does not take effect.
Right.
And so you'll have an inconsistent ruling based on a 4-4 tie.
Well, I do think this is a states' rights issue, and that's something I've been very I've been consistent in saying from day one every time we speak about this topic. And of course you'll find this shocking, but I disagree with my colleague. This is not making women's health worse. How can you say it's making women's health worse when, especially specifically in the Texas law, they're saying that we want to hold you up to higher standards and better standards. So they're asking for these surgical surgical centers and for these doctors to have better standards when you're performing these operations, this very serious operation. So the argument that they're saying, oh, it's not helping women's health is very false.
Let me go to Sally. You can talk about that in just a minute. Let me go to Sally.
That argument that you're speaking about is definitely the one that is playing out on social media. As we take a look at Twitter, our local Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee tweeting out, "No mother in the world wants her daughter to have fewer rights than she did." They're using the hashtag Stop the Sham for many of these tweets. And then Brianna fired back, unless of course she wants her to have no rights because she's being aborted. So that is the definitely the argument over women's health that's being played out here on social media.
And even when it was being argued here in Texas, the legislature in Texas, when they were arguing the women's health, Dan Patrick even admitted in private, and it was laid out, and he admitted it. This is all about abortion and his eventual desire to ban abortion cast under a women's health issue.
Yeah, and this case is kind of like the iterations of trying to make it about the patient, women, versus making it about the fetus. And there's incremental things that are happening. Court cases like this are happening across the country on this. But when we talk about healthcare, one of the single most important pillar of that is access. It's access to healthcare. So when you begin to reduce access, that's a way of reducing the number of services that women and others need around the state.
And to go to your point about Dan Patrick, he is very much a pro-life. His positions on pro-life has always been very strong, and he is entitled to his opinion. But many of the doctors, and I know one of them who was behind this legislation, they really believe that this is something to help women. That was their #1 priority, and that's why they passed this law.
I think his private statements that have been made public disagree with that contention, but we'll have to take that up for another day.